Hey everybody, and welcome to this episode of Transit Tangents. My name's Lewis.
And I'm Chris.
And today we are getting into the topic of 15-minute cities. Are they the conspiracy to lock us all up into our own little districts of the city and track all of our very movements? Or is it a plan to just make it so that you can maybe walk to the grocery store and pick your kids up from school on a bike and have a local coffee shop nearby? I'm not really sure. It could go either way, frankly. Especially if you do any research on this topic online. But yeah, that's what we're getting into today is 15-minute cities.
Yeah.
You liked my intro?
I love that intro.
I've been excited about this one.
What side does the pessimist of Lewis fall on?
See, what's
Entrapment
crazy?
or opportunity?
When even I am on the opportunity side of this one, you know that
That's
the folks are really going out there on this one. So, yeah, I mean, this isn't a crazy topic or anything like that. It's really just about setting up our communities to be more convenient for people living in them and for folks to have to be less reliant on getting in a car to drive places or even getting on transit in some cases, although it has a lot of downstream benefits for transit, I would argue.
Fairly recent history to this, too. In 2021, Carlos Moreno wrote an article kind of introducing the concept of 15-minute cities. It was 2021. Introduced the concept of 15-minute cities.
Yes.
But the concept, even though it didn't have the name 15-minute city, it is a concept that has gone back to antiquity.
Right.
Like the idea that all of your essential services are within close proximity to you.
Right, yeah. And I mean, this is kind of like an urbanism type thing. And like, when you look at cities, old cities in particular, they are already 15-minute cities, in quotes. Again, like really this gentleman, Carlos Moreno, really just like coined the term 15-minute cities, essentially. These things have been pushed for by urbanists for a long time. And we're just like, what happened a long time ago, long before anyone was advocating for this to be set up. It was just like, like people need to be able to walk to these things or, bike to these things or whatever. I mean, ride a horse to these things, whatever it would have been back
whatever
then.
Whatever your mode of transit.
Yeah, no, exactly. So really, we're just talking about creating good, livable environments. And, it in a lot of cases, it doesn't even necessarily need to be that like this specific city is a 15-minute city. It's just like creating parts of your town, parts of your city that folks could live in that area, and either you could have a 15-minute walking city, you could have a 15-minute biking city, and that the residents can get around easily. And generally what that means is creating good infrastructure for that sort of thing, which we've talked about in a whole lot of different episodes.
Well, and aside from good infrastructure, it also means good urban planning, good zoning. So you want to make sure that if you're going to implement a 15-minute city, you can add all the bike lanes that you want. But if you're not allowing the sidewalk cafe to exist on the same street as your homes, it's not going to help.
Right.
So just as important as the infrastructure piece and helping people be mobile and get around is the zoning piece.
Right. And, you get that in a lot of, they don't even need to be crazy dense, but even like kind of mid-range density places. So, personally, I can give a little bit of experience. I don't even live in like the best part of town for walkability and bikeability. I live on one of the busiest roads in Austin, arguably. But it's in an area where we have like pockets of this sort of thing. And like, I can walk to a small grocery store in less than 10 minutes. I've got several bars and restaurants within about that time frame. I've got coffee shops within that time frame. The place that I vote is I walk across the street. Like
you're in way more of a 15-minute city than I am.
Right, exactly. And but
I'm 2 miles to Starbucks.
Yeah, that's but what it's kind of meant for me to be close to these sorts of things. Like I have a convenience store. It's literally it's nothing beautiful or anything. It's a 7-Eleven, but it's across the street. And having lived in not even a good example of this, right? Conversations that I have with my partner when we're talking about moving in the future is like, why would we ever go back to what we had before? Because of the convenience levels, not because of, I'm going to be cordoned off into this zone and be, trapped into it. It's just like, if you're going to live in an urban area, why would you not want to be in this area? Which makes the whole kind of scheme of talking against these things and conspiracizing around them wild to me.
People don't want to live in highly dense urban areas to be inconvenienced. You typically live in these areas for the convenience factor, and that is better transportation, easier to get around without a car. In a lot of cases, you not necessarily are saving money in every city, but there are opportunities to save money with not paying things like for a car insurance. But you can walk to your healthcare provider. You can walk to a grocery store, to a cafe, to all of these different services that you would use in your everyday life. And it doesn't mean you have to go to the same ones either within this bubble around you. It's just there are going to be places that you go to most often, and if they are conveniently located to you, then you should be able to get to them quickly. And this concept, again, it's not new. Reading through 15-Minute Cities, something that stood out to me, somebody made a comment in one of the articles about how neighborhoods in poorer countries and in societies that had less technology, they built better neighborhoods than we have in what we consider the developed world and what we consider in the U.S. We, and for the most part, don't have good neighborhoods in most places in the U.S. But you go to these other countries that have, again, more impoverished communities, and maybe not even impoverished, just not as much as the U.S., their neighborhoods are going to be way more vibrant. They're going to have way more services that are in close proximity to them. And it's something that...
They'll often be more dense just in general, too, I would say.
And it's something that doesn't have to be foreign. It can absolutely be done in the U.S. Another big argument people made is one thing that Americans do when we go abroad, especially to Europe, is we walk around Europe and we're like, oh, it was great. I didn't have to rent a car. I took a train to the city. I stayed at my hotel and like walked to cafes and to the museum.
We didn't get in the car the whole time.
I hopped on the bus or I hopped on the subway, and it was wonderful. I loved it. And then you come back to your suburban home outside of Austin and you're like, I have to drive 20 minutes to H-E-B to get my groceries.
What's wild, though, is those same people who would go and do that will come home and be like, well, we can never do that here. And then we'll actively, like, vote against doing things like that. And they will be, like, the like, quote-unquote NIMBYs of their city or town in a lot of cases, who are trying to protect their single-family zoning and all this sort of stuff, which, like, directly goes against all of the things that they loved on their trip abroad in Europe. Which is just that's a little bit of an aside there, but we've also kind of talked a little bit about this, and it's maybe not the best example, but the episode where we talked about the suburbs, and we used the example here in Austin of the development called the Grove. Streetcraft has kind of talked about this on some of their episodes, referring to this too, where there's the potential for new mixed-use development that kind of encompasses this idea as well. Again, the Grove's not the perfect example of this, but they do have a small grocery store. It's not like a real, you're not doing your weekly full shop there. They've got a small grocery store. They've got a couple restaurants. School is not super far from that area. You've got good bike lanes and infrastructure. You've got the transit stops. So, there's also potential for this sort of thing in new developments out in the suburbs to be able to be like, hey, if you want to stay close to home to run some of your errands and be able to do so on foot, we're just providing that option for you. Now we're restricting you to staying here, but we're providing that option. One thing I want to... Oh, go ahead.
Well, I'll say that's actually, again, reading people who are proponents of this, that is actually a good argument for how we fix the suburbs, is you take these sort of strip mall wastelands that we've created and you redevelop them to be town centers. You tie in the multiple disconnected neighborhoods from around a suburb to at least being... centered around some type of town center, and then you get all of these services within a close proximity. And it may not be 15 minutes, it may be 20 minutes, but it is still something that is centralized.
And strip malls, like you mentioned, are a great example. Regular malls are a great example. Right now, there's a post that's been passed around on Twitter quite a bit that I'll make sure I link in here that is exactly that. It's a mall that had a proposal that, the mall becomes a town center, the parking lots become residential developments and whatnot. You use some of that parking lot and build a new school, whatever it may be.
We had a great example here in Austin, the ACC Highland campus here in Austin. We had Highland Mall, which anybody who lived in Austin for the last 20 years or more knows about Highland Mall. It was really defunct. All malls are kind of going out of business except for a few.
We're going to jump right back into this episode in just a second, but first, if you have not liked this video, go ahead and do so. Also, leave a comment. We love reading all of them and respond to as many as we can. And be sure that you are subscribed so that you catch every episode as they come out.
Please share this with your friends, and if you don't have time to watch YouTube videos in the future, you can catch us on any of the podcast platforms that are out there. Just be sure to leave us a rating and give us a comment. And they redeveloped the entire mall campus into ACC Highland. ACC is Austin Community College, but with turning the actual mall building into a community college, they also added There's a PBS station there. There are tons of apartments now. You have gyms nearby. You have cafes. You have a 24-hour coffee shop there. You have a transit stop right across the street.
Right.
Easy access to the highway. But tons of bus lines. Dedicated bike lanes, like really wide, really nice bike lanes off the street. So like they've turned this whole area into a really vibrant community that kind of starts to fall into this mold of a 15-minute city model.
Yeah, and I mean, to tie this even more into transit too, I mean, as we are developing, further out suburbs or like trying to densify areas on the outskirts of our cities, really like the surrounding of every single like metro stop or train station or rapid bus route or whatever it may be should really look like this. Like every transit stop should have some of these things, even if, maybe it's not a full-size grocery store at every single one, although that'd be like ideal to have all of these things that you need right there in that area to make it so that you don't need to get in a car or ride multiple stops down the train every single day if you don't want to. If you want to, that option is always still there for you.
You're allowed to leave your 15-minute bubble.
Yes, you're allowed to leave your zone. You're allowed to leave your district. All you need to do is show your district card at the crossing point and make sure that you swipe and that the government official on the other end of it approves it for you, and then you'll be able to leave the district. They're going to track all of your movements, but you'll be able to leave.
You'll pay your congestion pricing as you go into the next district.
Sorry.
We haven't even got into the conspiracy theory yet.
Yeah. I mean, we might as well shift into that if you want to.
Before we do that, so cities are actively moving toward this sort of 15-minute city model. Paris is a big example. We've talked about it during our Olympics episode. Paris is going really hard on taking spaces for cars away from the city, and to make that viable, you really have to work on city services and making things more accessible, and that includes pushing into this sort of 15-minute city model where they are making sure that the right zoning's in place for you to have the cafes and the restaurants and the shops that you need. They've turned about 100 streets into pedestrian streets now.
It's amazing.
They've added a ton of bike racks, a ton of biking infrastructure. They are expanding their metro by a ridiculous amount. Again, if you're curious about that, go back and watch our episode about the Olympics. The amount of work Paris is doing to make their city, completely transform it into a city where you don't need a car.
Right.
The work is amazing.
Right.
So it's one city that's really fallen into this push, and that's with the mayor. Remind me her name.
You're asking the wrong guy.
Cool.
Anne Hidalgo was the name. We just looked it up. Anne
Hidalgo. Anne Hidalgo is huge right now in the urbanist world for the amount of work she's doing in Paris.
Absolutely. And again, it's just like, outside of big cities like Paris, I would make the argument that it's about offering more freedom for people. Like you now, instead of being required to get in a car to go to a grocery store, you now have the freedom to choose to be able to walk to a grocery store, bike to a grocery store, or you can still get in your car if you want to. No one is trying to restrict you being able to get in your car. They're just trying to provide the options so that you don't necessarily have to. And that can have a lot of great downstream effects from being better for the planet and not needing to burn fossil fuels, but also help your bottom line and your wallet. Like I moved into a better part of town where I can walk and bike to more places more easily, and it has made my partner and I's ability to have one car between the two of us much more possible, saving us, I did the math, I mean, we save over $7,000 a year because we have one car instead of two. And that was with like a fairly low car payment and all that sort of stuff. That dollar amount could be higher for you. And $7,000 a year is that's real money.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's serious money. And investing in things like the concept of a 15-minute city in your area can help residents in these areas save real money, save time, and just have a more convenient setup where they live.
Yeah. But 15 minutes.
15-minute middies.
15-minute cities aren't without their critics.
Yes.
Some of them more vocal than others.
Yes. And I mean, there are a lot of fun ones out there, and maybe there'll be a bunch of pops on the screen here of hilarious tweets and articles and whatever. But
before we jump into the example you wanted to say, I do want to call out, there was a good example online that took place in Oxford. In Oxford in the UK, they were talking about adding dedicated bus lines in the city.
Bus lanes, right?
Bus lanes. Yeah, sorry, dedicated bus lanes in the city. And at one of their city meetings, there was a group of people that they didn't recognize who were there and started asking a lot of questions. And it blew up into this huge kind of altercation with folks who were on this conspiracy theory that 15-minute cities are bad, and that the World Economic Forum, I think they had it thrown in there, was behind it all. It's kind of crazy. So the people who are really against them have fallen into this weird conspiracy. And Oxford was one place that was a flashpoint. Right.
And the conspiracy involves like what I've been joking
what you've been alluding to. But I just wanted to lay that groundwork before we then talk about how that conspiracy theory is being espoused here in the U.S. by far right media personalities. One of those being.
Yeah, so the clip that we'll play in a second, which is pretty funny, is from the Joe Rogan podcast. Really, he's talking to Tulsi Gabbard. I don't know how this necessarily came up in this conversation, but we'll play the clip for you just so you can hear it. But really going in on the kind of everyone will be clamped down into their districts.
What are those 15-minute cities?
Yeah, I'm curious
What
about
are the
that.
plans for these fucking things?
I've heard of it, but as I look it up, there's an article from Canada that says it's a little bit of a conspiracy theory.
Canada's a conspiracy theory. Canada's literally a functioning conspiracy theory.
It's just a concept to bring things to within 15 people.
Right, but isn't there something going on in a 15-minute city that they tried in the UK? Isn't there something along those lines? Just Google that. 15-minute city in UK.
But I mean, what do you want me? I don't
Just
know what I'm
see what
looking
it.
for.
Just Google that. 15-minute city in UK.
15-minute city.
I know it's going to come up, but I don't know what I'm looking for. Is what I'm saying.
15-minute hysteria.
That's from March.
Rather benign urban planning concept. Yeah. English city of Oxford. Click that. Yeah. Okay. An academic behind the hit urban... The hit. It's a hit, guys. It's like fucking Saturday Night Fever. It's a hit. The hit urban planning concept slammed flat earthers spreading fake news about livable cities. Oh, yeah, you're a flat
Blame
earther
the flat
if you don't want to
earthers.
be trapped in a 15-minute city.
Where's Kelly Slater when you need him?
So scroll down here. Is Kelly Slater a flat earther?
He jokes around. He just torches people all the time.
So a rather benign urban planning concept is shaking up the English city of Oxford, sending thousands of people into the streets to protest what they say is a dystopian plan to take away their personal freedoms and lock them into their neighborhoods. The concept of the 15-minute city, popularized by the Franco-Colombian academic Carlos Moreno, aims to make cities more livable by ensuring that all essential services, think schools, medical care, and shops, are within the distance of a short walk or bicycle ride. Broadly, the idea is to cut down on long commutes and car emissions and improve people's quality of life, ensuring they have access to quality services where they live. It's not the way it's being seen. In Oxford, news of the city council adopted a plan to embrace the 15-minute city model, prompted fierce backlash with local groups and public figures alleging that authorities plan to restrict residents to their immediate neighborhoods and strictly police their movements, which will happen eventually. The idea that that won't happen eventually, particularly in the case of a pandemic or something where they can control people, that this is not a fucking conspiracy theory. The outrage has been fanned by popular right-wing media figures and politicians who seized on the issue as an outrageous example of government overreach.
I feel like I'm in the Hunger Games after listening to that.
Yeah, what my favorite part of it is the idea that like they're all kind of gawking at the idea that like like you're able to walk to to the school or the hospital or a local coffee shop, like talking about
Sounds
like
awful.
livable cities, yes, or like walkable places as being a negative thing is pretty wild to me. And like, I mean, this isn't just like Joe Rogan either. This is like, we picked on him just because he's a very big example in this, and he's local.
He's
Yes,
local
he lives
also.
right down the street.
That's how I had
basically.
dinner in front of them the other night.
You did not tell me that. Wow.
I was at a sushi place and I looked across and Joe Rogan was sitting on the other side, and
that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
You did not tell me that.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So I mean, that's one example. But again, there are. I mean, his example.
He was in the corner of the sushi restaurant. It's like, oh, if only I could go another mile outside of the zone, I wouldn't have to eat here.
Yes. Yeah. There's a better sushi restaurant just a little further down the street. Surrounding COVID, there was also a lot. Like the Joe Rogan example is almost kind of minor in comparison to some of the other ones. He's like lightly mentioning it, but kind of clearly doesn't know what he's talking about on this. Like he's like, Google this specific thing. Which is kind of strange that he decided to go down that rabbit hole there. But there are people who, frankly, like know more about it, who go way further and the whole World Economic Forum element to this, and like talking about the next pandemic, you're gonna literally be cordoned off into your zone because somehow they're now gonna have the ability to lock you into this zone, this the
15-minute city model also means that walls go up around your 15-minute city.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So
we forgot that part.
It's pretty wild. Clearly not what's happening, but fun to look at nonetheless.
But aside from the conspiracy theories, there are some forces out there that actually are hindering us from moving forward with a lot of these 15-minute city models. It's hard for me to say. Some of those being NIMBYs, obviously.
Yes.
You're going to have this big NIMBY movement that's anti-development, anti-anything transit-related. That's always going to be a major factor, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And, frankly, we are seeing positive developments in this direction in a lot of cities across the country. But not to keep mentioning it, but Austin has really done a ton as far as being on the opposite side of that, being a very YIMBY city council at the moment. We basically have like a super majority YIMBY council already, where like 9 out of the 10 people on city council are very much actively pushing for this stuff. Maybe not 9 of them, but 9. You'll get a lot.
I think
of
it's
votes
about 9,
on them.
8 or 9. Yeah.
Where we just cut our minimum lot sizes in half in the city. They're working on basically like putting out new stuff where there's now increased density near all of our proposed light rail lines, and there's more coming down the line as well.
Which leads into the other issue that kind of hinders us from getting to 15-minute cities is the zoning.
Right.
Zoning has to change in a lot of communities for you to be able to really push this model, and changing zoning laws is always a challenge.
Right.
It has been a challenge in Austin for years.
Right. And it's been tried before, and when Home, which is what it's called here, Home Phase 1 and Home Phase 2 passed. Home Phase 2 passed a month
Before that
ago.
it was Code Next.
Yeah, but it only passed after a city council meeting that started at 10 o'clock in the morning and ended at almost 2 o'clock in the morning the next day. And then they had to still come in the next day to actually go ahead and vote for it. So that is how many people came out to speak, both in support and against it. It was hundreds of people came out to speak on this stuff. So
people don't want to give up their single-family lots, and that's fine. But zoning changes also don't force you to give up your single-family lots. It just gives you the ability that when you sell this lot, it can be subdivided, or you may subdivide it yourself, make a little extra money.
Yeah, we'll have to do we'll do a zoning specific conversation on another day. But Austin's an interesting case study here, I would say.
Yeah, another one that I found interesting that was almost a hindrance to this was urban schools. So I was reading about this. There's this general concept that young couples live in the city, they get pregnant, they have kids, they move out to the suburbs because supposedly the suburbs have better schools. That's not always true.
Right.
That the suburbs have better schools. In a lot of cases, urban schools are fine and actually do really, really well. Like Austin public schools do pretty well.
In other cases, it's definitely not, though.
It's not. Not in all cases, for sure. But there's this this theory that you also need to heavily invest in your school systems for this to be a model that works for your communities. So the idea that schools may be underperforming in urban areas can prevent people from sort of adopting this 15-minute city model.
Yes. Well, with that, though, let us know what do you think. This was a little bit more of a fun episode, a little on the shorter side, but what do you think about this concept? Do you live in an area that you would consider something like a 15-minute city, whether it be a 15-minute walking city in a very dense area or a 15-minute biking city potentially? Or are you on the side of the conspiracy theorists here who think you're going to be cordoned off into some zone or another and you need to show your ID everywhere you go?
We're going to get really, really weird comments.
We probably will. I'm excited to read them. Maybe we're going to get flagged as misinformation too. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah.
If you enjoyed this episode and you're watching on YouTube, please consider liking the video or subscribing. If you're just listening on your favorite podcast platform, whatever that may be, consider giving us a 5-star rating. You can also...
So you could also comment on those as well. The Apple Podcast platform, which is where most of our listeners are coming from. You can actually comment on there as well. We have a comment, so please leave your rating, leave a comment. If you want to support us, there's not a whole lot of money that goes into producing these, but there's a little bit. So
there's
if you want
time and love.
There's a lot of time and love. But if you want to support us, you can go to transittangents.com. On there, there's a little button in the banner that says support. It'll take you to Buy Me a Coffee, and you can buy us a coffee.
With that, thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you on the next Transit Tangents Tuesday.
car, yeah, I'm saving that dough. Public transit's where it's at, watch me go.